Hi, I'm Orchid. We're almost there. Um, Thank you for staying here while I'm up here. I'm really honored to be here with the other people who have spoken. And I thought I would start out by telling you just a little bit about my family. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, a little town surrounded by corn, hay, exciting things. And I grew up in a family that had lots of areas of agreement and lots of areas of disagreement. So an area of agreement that we had was no guns. We were very bizarre. We were maybe more bizarre for not being into guns than we were for being Asian, and we were the only Asians. So later there were 2 Indian families, and but you could count it. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Gentle. But not being into guns was a huge thing in our part of the country. And so, but we had no guns. So my brother had all kinds of ninja weapons and all these things. Yeah, he wanted to buy all of that stuff. Thank God there was no online shopping yet. And he was allowed to. It was only a few years ago that I asked him, I said, do you think that you being the only Asian boy in our town, probably county, had anything to do with why you were obsessed with weapons? And he was like, probably. And I was like, hey, look, we can talk about some of these things. I think so too. But we were allowed to, we had Legos, we had battles. We were allowed to take the wrapping paper, the wrapping paper inside the cardboard. Toilet paper too short, that's a bad sword. But we could use the wrapping paper one as a sword, and we could do that, but no guns, no gun playing, no shooting your sister with a fake gun, none of that. That's where we agreed. We disagreed about Confucius. So Confucius, my mom would be like, Confucius said, a woman belongs to her father, and then she belongs to her husband, and then if he dies, she belongs to her son. And my dad was like, what a leading thinker. And my mom was like, his thinking was boring, dominant, and harmful. So conflict. But we made it. I made it through central Pennsylvania. Years later, I was in college. I moved out of state. I went to college, and I saw this ad on a listserv. And it was when listservs were just starting. And there was this job ad about a job at Asian Women's Shelter. And I was like, what? What is this place called Asian Women's Shelter? How can there be an Asian Women's Shelter? How can there be enough people who care about safety for Asian families to staff a place called Asian Women's Shelter? So I was like, I must work here. So I applied for the job. Raise your hand if you think I got the job. I did not get the job. I did not get the job because, as it turns out, there are tons of people who care about ending violence, about preserving safety, about increasing happiness in Asian families. There are tons of people who know that a violent childhood prepares no one to do well in this world. So I didn't get the job because I was a 22-year-old little nothing who was not ready. And Hediana, who's sitting there, she got the job. That was in 2000, and then she trained me in 2001 to be a volunteer and a language advocate. And then in 2002, I applied for a job. And raise your hand if you think I got the job. I got the job. So sometimes you have to stick it out to find your right spot in how to create more stability, more happiness, more opportunity for the people that you care the most about, and that society doesn't value in the same way as society is currently upholding its most valuable people. So I came out here, I took the job, and now I'm part of this amazing, amazing community, huge community that has these secret agents scattered all over the Bay Area, people who have gone through training with Asian Women's Shelter since 1988 when we opened, caring about safety, health, healing, well-being, partnership, togetherness through the most horrifying traumas, stress, fear, uncertainty. That's our jam, as they say in English. That's our soy sauce. I don't know what we would say, but that's our sauce. That's what we do. And we stick around because we care about it a lot. It is not a passing interest. And so I get to be here representing all of these amazing people who know that to get through uncertainty and fear, we have to be side by side with each other. Everybody has times of being terrified. Everybody has times when you feel like you can't do it by yourself. You just need someone to be on the stage with you. You need someone to go through this, someone you can text in the middle of the night when you think you cannot get a grip, as they say. You can't hold yourself together. So, and also I get to be at AWS with people who know that we sometimes have to remind each other that we can be so much more than what our fear and our anger can drive us toward. Sneakily drive us toward. And we need people to remind us that we can be more, we can be better. So I'm just going to touch on 4 things. These are 4 ways that I feel like AWS has taught me and that I have learned from my own family of how to be more than my fear, more than my uncertainty, and more than my anger. We all have all of those. So first is when we're scared. What happens when we're terrified? It's like FFF. What happens?
Fight, flight, freeze.
Yes. See, we like to answer the questions, model minority, but some of it sometimes, Yes, fight, flight, freeze. So when we're scared, we might disappear, shut down, or we might get aggressive back. Sometimes we get aggressive back because it's the only way. Other times, we might slip down a slippery slope where we start saying, arm everybody, arm the teachers, arm the people at the hospital, arm the small business owners. Let's get Chinatown together and make us really, really, really strong in a violent way, violent response to fear. And so I'm going to say no to both of those, because our fight, flight, or freeze response, it passes. We work through it with friends, and then we get our whole self back. We can think with our whole self. We have reason, we have compassion. That's how we come up with good solutions. Clearly, I don't think arming the entire nation, even more than it's already armed, is the solution. So, I brought up Confucian. I'm not like this all the time. They can attest I'm not like Confucianism every day at Asian Women's Shelter. But since I brought that up, I'll say Taoism. We take the middle road. We don't shut down. We don't just get big and aggressive. There's a much better road. Second thing, when we're scared, we get into us versus them. This is where we're safe, you're different. And all out there, all of you all, unsafe. Unsafe, 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 unsafe. Who looks the most like me? Me, safe. It's normal. It's human. So we can be better than that too. We have to be better than that. Other people have already said we have to make friends. And I came from Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. If I tried to hold an event like this today, not when I was a kid, not in the 70s and the 80s, but today, it would be me having a lovely time with my mom and a couple other people. That's it. That's the case for most API people in this country. This is totally rare. When I came out here, I was like, who are these Asians who grew up in a classroom with like other people who looked like them? People made fun of my eyes, my face, my nose, and I'm mixed. And they made fun of my eyes, my nose, everything, every day. Their parents did, every time, the grocery store, the bank, the post office. It's just normal. It's a little better now. But it's not the Bay Area. It is not San Francisco. The rest of the country is not here. So if I had just been like, oh, I'm gonna, us versus them, and I'm gonna base it on how I look, I would have been sitting on my bottom by myself, creating enemies and missing a whole bunch of opportunity to make friends, because everybody who looks different is not against us. at all. People have already said that better than I am. There are people who know a lot about suffering, and when we connect with them, we have more friends, and we're less likely to fall down that slippery slope of us versus them because we're scared. Next one. Okay. When we're scared. Protection. Obviously, protection is a huge thing. We want to protect. We want to protect our family. We want to protect our community. So we have this protection from outsiders. These are connected. Protection from outsiders, and we forget about the inside. And we're like, nope, the stress is too big. The danger is too big. We can't have any fractioning inside. We have to have unity inside. Everything's good inside. Everything outside is bad and dangerous. Not really good. Comes out of fear. And really, so many of our communities have such a huge history of sacrifice. Sacrifice for children, and a lot of expectation of sacrifice on women, that you sacrifice for the family harmony. Not everybody is responsible for the same way for that family harmony. Some people better you better hold it together and make that family harmony happen. We don't want that sacrifice. We don't want it anymore. No more sacrificing and no more leaving anybody behind. And the reality is Asian Women's Shelter's been here since 1988. Why? Because Asian women, we're not half of the population. We're not half of the living population, but a whole bunch of times we're half of the dead. When we're half of those murdered by domestic violence, we can't only pay attention when someone who looks different from us hurts us. We have to pay attention all the time. We have to love and care for everybody who's hurt, everybody who's vulnerable. And if we look at that, I'm not afraid. That doesn't make schism. We're stronger when we do that. Instead of suppress, our communities, please, has suppression worked? Suppression does not work. Talk about mental health, it's bad. So if we do talk about that and we live our own culture of protecting everybody, then we can spread that outward. We can spread it up in legislation, we can spread it across to other communities, and we live our motto that everybody's life and their safety, their ability to go for a walk, their ability to get health insurance is precious. Their ability to be a kid is precious. Everyone. So no more of this, like, forget the stuff inside. Shh. It's perfect. Family harmony, intergenerational homes, zero problems. All our elders so cared for. That's not true. We have elder abuse, we have child abuse, we have abuse of women, wives, girlfriends, we have abuse of LGBT people, bullying. So let's not shove that under the rug. It doesn't work, and it's mean. Okay. Last one is, I think when we're scared and we see a big problem, a very natural response is just to collapse, I think. To collapse. It's too much. The feelings are too big. The loss is too deep. The tragedy. The Supreme Court is too conservative. America's love affair with guns is too passionate. Anti-Asian xenophobia, I can go on and on. Anti-Asian xenophobia is too widespread. Everybody seems to have it. So if we do that, raise your hand if you want me to believe that. No, raise your hand if you want each other to believe that. No, it's ineffective. It's a momentary passing feeling. We're overwhelmed, we want to collapse. But our feelings and our actions, as has been said, we need to be taught to separate them. They are not the same. And we don't have to collapse. There are a million things we can do. Raise your hand if you have the right to vote. Not everybody has this. If you have the right to vote, use that. Don't use it every 4 years. Do it every 2 years. Do it for all the special elections. Who supports gun control in the way that you want? Pay attention, this intersects with us versus them. Black and Asian community are tied for valuing gun control the most, for valuing not wanting, for saying we don't want assault weapons in the US, we want them banned. Many of us come from countries that have amazing gun control and literally almost no gun violence. If these surveys were only to our communities who don't speak English, it would be way different. I look at the numbers that are about, how many people access mental health, and I think about how many of the responders in our communities were people who spoke English. If you asked people in our communities who don't speak English how much they access mental health, it would not be like, it would be humongous, unacceptable percentage of people that don't. So, okay, you can use your vote. Raise your hand if you have kids. Raise your hand if you can keep it up or add it if your siblings have kids. If you have grandkids. If you have interaction with kids in some homey ways. Yeah, there's a million opportunities to stop violence and to stop intergenerational violence, a million ways. It doesn't have, our family, okay, no guns, but you can stop when because all of these forms of violence, they don't just pop out of the blue. We've talked about rhetoric. They start at home. They always start at home. Sometimes the horrific incidents literally started with violence at home against the grandmother who's raising that young person because there's no one else left to take care of that kid. Violence against mothers, grandparents, siblings, and of course partners, that it starts there. There's people in the family who know that we're in a red flag area. There's people maybe in the emergency room, maybe in the police department, but always the family who know. So we can support those people. You can vote for non-punitive mental health systems development. You can vote for so many things. So, okay, we did the vote. We're talking about the children. When you see your nephew or you hear your nephew scream, I mean scream, I'm talking from experience, scream at their mother or their grandmother in a way they would never dare take their frustration out on their dad or their grandfather. When you hear that and nobody interrupts that child to teach him, yes, you have frustration. This isn't how we deal with frustration. This isn't how we treat our family. This isn't how we treat anybody. If we catch that in the home, everything that starts at home goes out. We stop the flood outward of violence. And we help that kid have a better life, because screaming at your loved ones is also not a happy life. So, okay, we can change things with our children. Awesome. I don't have any children. Our nephews, our nieces, all the little ones. Finally, most of the people at Asian Women's Shelter, they are not. This is not to say that everyone who experiences violence is low income. It's that everybody who needs a shelter is low income, usually. Most of the people we work with, they're low income. Many are undocumented. Many are low wage worker or no wage worker. And some of us out there are landlords. Some of us have one rental property that we manage. Some of us use public transit. We're all everywhere. That's what's awesome. So you can do something every single day. If please rent to that mom who has no rental history and no credit history, who's never been on a lease for herself and her kid before, and whose income you're not totally sure about. Take the act. Be brave. Like Brandon, it's not always going to be someone with a gun coming in the door. There are other ways to make safety and other ways to make well-being and other ways to show that we care for the vulnerable in our community all the time. It can be on the bus. It can be at Costco for the woman in hijab who's pretty sure nobody would stick up for her if somebody looked at her funny, tried to grab a part of her. Look at her, smile at her, be friendly, cross the lines to show I'm here for you, and then people will be here for us. So I'm just going to close with that. Be brave like Brandon. Be brave, even if what's in front of you isn't necessarily that kind of a charged life or death situation. People's lives still depend on it, and we can be part of the solution so that their lives are kept. Thank you.